Welcome to part 2 of my video series about the hexagrams of the I Ching, decoding the trigram wheel. All the information in this series is taken directly from my book, The DNA Code of I Ching, by Jody Milner. It is available on Amazon. The link can be found in the description below. A combination of Chinese history and mythology points to the original trigram wheel as the progenitor of everything related to the oracle. Fu Xi, a ruler predating 2000 BC, is the first person associated with this ancient artifact. It seems that during his work at flood control on the Yellow River, the river dragon sent him a tortoise with the image of the 8 trigrams. My interpretation of this myth is that during cleanup after a great flood, an ancient artifact of the trigram wheel was unearthed. Because the artifact had been churned up or pushed downstream by the flood, it was considered a gift of the river dragon. Additionally, because the octagonal shape of the trigram wheel is reminiscent of a tortoise shell and the line markings resemble those seen on tortoise shells, the unearthed artifact became forever identified as having arrived on the back of a river tortoise. What significance or hidden mystery did the artifact hold? How did the early discoverers of the trigram wheel answer these questions as they incorporated the trigrams into their traditional culture and rituals? There is one historical clue which comes in the way of animal bones and tortoise shells found in pits. Many of these had been purposely burned in fires until surface cracks formed. These relics have been unearthed during modern times. On many of the bones and shells, there is an early form of script. The script is assumed to be written questions, and the fire-caused cracks are assumed to be the responses to the queries. The burned and cracked bones and shells have been linked to the trigrams. The idea is that this early culture had assigned meaning to the trigrams and then used the cracking of bones and shells as an oracle for seeking information about future events. This idea makes perfect sense. Even today, people bestow mythological, ritual, or magical properties onto ancient information they cannot completely understand. Once discovered, why and how were the trigrams assembled into hexagrams? My personal experience with the earlier Heaven trigram wheel and its resulting hexagrams has shown me they are an intuitive, instructional knowledge system. Theoretically, an individual could assemble the earlier Heaven trigram wheel by logically considering the 2 types of lines of which it is composed, broken and solid. Simply beginning with the possibilities inherent in a broken and a solid line, the 4 emblems, or couplets, can be formed. They are the only 4 possible combinations of 2 lines. These could be used as digits of 0 to 3, but this would not be a very satisfactory result. Next, one could increase the stacked lines to sets of 3. I am not sure why a grouping of triple lines would be created, unless it were to assemble a counting method. In this case, a set of 3-line stacks consisting of broken and solid lines would result in a binary numeral set of 8 digits. Looking at the emblems from left to right, we see numerals 0, 1, 2, and 3. Adding a 3rd line to the stack gives a possible set of numerals, from 0 through 7. Because it is a closed set, it is still not a very satisfactory result. Reasons for their creation aside, at this point, an interesting feature of the trigrams emerges. The 8 trigrams opposing each other can be paired as 4 binary, or line-to-line opposite pairs. Using the trigram counting system, these opposites always add up to 7 when considered as numbers. When the trigrams are numerically assembled into this octagonal pattern of line-to-line opposites, the results must be a split numeric system. This pattern is how the original trigram wheel embedded into the culture of Fu Xi. How the earlier Heaven trigram wheel came to be created remains a mystery. This intuitive and instructional wheel points directly to the idea of pairing the 8 trigrams to form hexagrams. It does not ask for 3 or more trigrams to be stacked together. It directly points to the method of pulling pairs of trigrams to center to merge them into sets of 6 lines. Because it is a highly organized system of patterns, I looked for any obvious technical clues when pairing the trigrams at center. These wheels show the method I used to combine the trigrams. This method resulted in the 8 houses I had found earlier using a far more complicated system. If the trigram wheel, as found in its earliest form, is a legitimate key, which unlocks a binary code, it must contain all relevant information. These are the resulting house sets. There is an organized pattern of 4 flipped pairs and 4 line-to-line opposite pairs within each group of 8. Next, The hexagrams needed to be assigned logical designations or labels so they could be easily compared and discussed as independent patterns. But how? This brings back the idea of the four emblems, or couplets, as shown earlier. When I added the numeric labels of 0, 1, 2, or 3 to the three emblems which compose each hexagram, obvious organizational patterns between the hexagrams and houses emerged. For example, 4 of the house sets have 0 and 3 as their center emblem, and the other 4 sets have 1 and 2 at the center. Emblems of line-to-line opposite hexagrams always add up to 3, 3, 3. The next logical step was to sequence the hexagrams according to their emblems. This was accomplished by beginning with the bottom couplet sequence of 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, then moving to 1 in the central couplet and again sequencing the bottom set, 0, 10, 0, 11, 0, 2, 0, 13. Once placed into sequential order according to emblems, they were given a numeric label. As it turned out, when beginning with 0 and proceeding through 63, these correlate to each hexagram's binary value. I kept the color coding as house identifiers. The binary values are counted as shown in these tables. Solid lines begin with a value of 1 on the first line and double in value moving up the ladder. One can add up the individual line values of a hexagram, or memorize the values of the upper and lower trigrams and add up the trigram pair. In the trigram value chart, top values are for the upper trigrams and bottom values are for the lower trigrams. Looking at this sequenced 8x8 grid, I noticed the distinct color pattern of the primary and complementary houses. When I removed everything other than the yellow and green house groups, I was left with this pattern. These are the houses that start with binary values of 0 and 7. I then looked for other color-coded patterns. These turned out to be the houses beginning with 1 and 6, as well as 2 with 5 and 3 with 4. Eventually, I realized the 4 grids were all making the same pattern. I tiled each grid into groups of 4 to reveal that each of the house pairs created an identical pattern to the yellow and green pair. The sets of 4 are shown. Next, I moved each 16 hexagram pattern into its own 8x8 grid. Because the primary and complementary houses were already centered in their correct positions, I only needed to move the other 3 sets. This resulted in the position charts. Each hexagram has its own position. This results in each of the 16 positions having 4 hexagrams which occupy it. I then arranged the 4 patterns into a series as shown below. This group is highly reminiscent of the double helix of the DNA code upon which all earthly life is built. Having earlier discovered the 8 houses, geometry, magic squares, and pyramid blueprints coded within the hexagrams of I Ching, I believed I had completed my work. I documented these findings in my previous books, and they are included in the next parts of this video series. One day, while continuing to investigate I Ching on the internet, I stumbled across an image connecting hexagrams to our genetic code. It was included as additional material with a translation of Sacred Books of the East from 1899. I was intrigued by this image. A part of that image is included here. The hexagrams were arranged into a binary sequence split system, just as I had arranged them earlier on my own. I was especially interested in the dissection of hexagrams into 3 color-coded 2-line emblems. I had previously explored parts of the 1973 book, The I Ching and the Genetic Code, by Dr. Martin Schonberger, specifically about hexagrams being considered in relationship to genetics. However, not being a geneticist, I didn't make much sense of it at the time. Also, like everything else about I Ching, authors want to connect the mathematical patterns and science to the mysticism of the meanings assigned to the 64 hexagrams. This quickly muddies the water, in my opinion. The symbolic meanings for the hexagrams were most likely written or compiled by King Wen around 1000 BC, more than 1,000 years after the discovery of the earlier heaven trigram wheel. Soon after finding the image highlighting the emblem triplets, I began a limited study of codon charts, DNA and RNA coding, proteins, amino acids, and their alignments. As I am not an expert in genetics, I am not going to attempt to instruct the reader in DNA science. I am here to point out the similarity between the patterns inherent in both the 64 hexagrams and the 64 possible codon groupings. The following is a circular codon chart as found in many forms, both round and square, on the internet. I like this one because it includes the amino acid abbreviations. Using the four-color scheme for emblems, as cited, I rotated the circle to represent the lower and upper hemispheres of a binary split system, as in my previous maps. Gradually, I arrived at the following chart. It is organized by the same emblem code sequence, which is also the binary numeric sequence. Next, I connected the four emblems to the four codons, as had been done on the internet site previously documented. In this chart, I added the codon letter abbreviations and the amino acids alongside the corresponding hexagrams. The color-coded emblems help with ease of reading. Black represents two broken lines, or 0. Blue represents a solid line under a broken line, or 1. Yellow represents a broken line under a solid line, or 2. Pink represents two solid lines, or 3. Black 0 pairs with pink 3 and blue 1 pairs with yellow 2. Emblem pairs always total 3. On the hexagram wheel, each hexagram's binary value is directly across from its binary opposite partner. The wheel is split and moving in opposite directions numerically from 0 and from 32, and opposing hexagram always add to 63. Now that the element of genetic coding has been added, we will return to the position charts. Of course, there is no definitive way to discern codons and amino acids from earlier Heaven trigram wheel. It is simply the mathematics of the DNA code. After decoding the 16 pattern positions of the 64 hexagrams, as previously shown in the pattern charts, I assembled them into one pattern chart for clarity. Next, I closely examined the binary grid for any new clues as to how to proceed with utilizing the patterns. I created the following grid with added positions to further orient my perspective. I found that every possible 4x4 hexagram group contained one of each of the 16 positions. Although it was a tedious process, I documented each 16 hexagram set, which is in my book. There are 64 unique sets. Then I began assembling the sets into individual position charts. I soon realized that each set has its own binary complement set. I assembled these into paired sets, flipping and mirroring images of the second set so that all binary opposites align. All sets and paired sets are included in the end chapters of my book. Here, I will show explanatory examples. When comparing the two 4x4 sets, it can be observed that column 0 in the first row is a flipped mirror matchup of column 4 in the fifth row. They are composed of binary opposites. Binary opposite pairs add up to 63 or 3 plus 3 plus 3. There is only one 4x4 set, which matches up with one other set. All A's align with T or U's, and G's align with C's. Now imagine this position pair as three-dimensionally side by side rather than stacked on a flat surface. The double helix, as coded in the earlier Heaven trigram wheel, becomes clear. Once the code, or key, of earlier Heaven trigram wheel has been fully unlocked, it can be put away and replaced with the 8x8 grid and the split system hexagram wheel it revealed. Everything presented here, other than the names of codons and amino acids, can be directly decoded from this ancient artifact. The entire decoding process, as presented, can be accomplished directly from studying the earlier Heaven trigram wheel. The resulting patterns are fascinating, but the central question remains. Why was the octagonal trigram wheel created? What is the original purpose of the hexagram language it encodes? Did an ancient forgotten civilization understand the DNA code? I wanted to take the reader on a step-by-step journey through the decoding of earlier Heaven trigram wheel, which took me years of time, determination, and patience to fully grasp. However, on its own, it contains all the mathematical information I have described. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up and tune into the next section about King Wen's puzzle.